Good morning, everyone. How many of you actually use the XML PHP before? Can you raise your hand? All right. Half of you. So I assume half of you probably didn't explore the APIs and things like that. But today is an introduction of what we do on the RESTful API and how you can use it to enhance your application and integrate with other third-party data sources. My colleague, Chen, is the developer for the data API. So after the session, we have a Q&A, and he can answer specific questions you have. I think that the flow is like when we talk about the features and talk about the architecture, if you have a question, write it down. At the end, we have a Q&A. So at that time, we can do the question and answer. So it's better for the flow for the presentation. Thanks for the cooperation. And when you ask questions, since it's recorded, we have microphone, and you can raise your hand, and we'll get you the microphone to ask the question. My name is James Cho, and I'm the Director of Engineering in charge of server, cloud, and database engine. And lately, I was touching the client part as well. So if you have any question at the end of the session about the product, you can also ask me. So we use the data API was first being considered to deploy in the cloud environment. Basically, the rationale for that is we have a server in the cloud, and we need to talk to the other data sources. In the cloud, actually, there are many data sources that people can access, and they all provide API. Without the RESTful API, we actually can't talk to these third parties. So this is kind of things like we must have for a cloud environment. But it's not limited to the cloud. So that's why when we design it, we say, well, we can't just make it for cloud. So we have to make the same thing for on-premise server as well. So that's why the feature now is available for both cloud environment and on-premise server. So when we design the cloud, first we work on our server. So make the server actually a cloud-friendly server, and it can leverage the features in AWS, right? AWS has a lot of services, but none of them is kind of hard-coded. So they are always changing. And the way you interact with AWS is through their API. So basically, if you want to develop something on Amazon's AWS environment, you don't expect them not changing. I mean, it's impossible for them to keep it the same. So what they do is they provide a lot of APIs. So you program or you actually call these APIs instead of just hard code their features there. So that's the first thing we look into that. So OK, if we wanted to leverage the features in AWS, the first thing we have to do is to change our server to be able to talk in API mode, right? So that's why the first thing we do is we make our server talk to our own pieces, like a server admin consoles and all those kind of things. We actually talk in the language of JSON and RESTful API. So you see, like there are a few modules we use. I mean, we first introduced Node.js, which is basically a core part to support the API. And the server now having database server and the Node.js side by side. And between Node.js and our database server, internally, we also call RESTful API ourselves. So this is basically the model we are heading into. And also, you see a virtual DBA. The virtual DBA is something that we put on top of a cloud server to do a lot of transactional things to manage the server for the system administrator. So this is basically a piece and on the server and talk to the database server using the RESTful API as well. Then we look at our cloud back office. We have a back office services. For example, if you have an instance running in FileMaker Cloud, you automatically get a subdomain on top of FileMakerCloud.com. Who is going to manage that? Actually, we call Route 53 services from Amazon to implement that, so which is also a RESTful API call. So we do that. And also, we have the domain name certificate services, as well as the patch services. None of them can run without RESTful API call. So that's why API call is basically the center of our cloud server. And the Node.js server has been the key part of the server now. So after we look at the whole thing, we say, OK, we have the Node.js there. And can we actually do more with it? Right? And we look into it. The data API is the next thing we work on. Basically, when we look at the RESTful API, we say, OK, what if a customer wanted to talk to third party, for example, Salesforce.com? And Salesforce.com, you cannot access their database directly. So our ESS will not work. But they do provide a RESTful API set. So you can call their RESTful API and get the data and send the data. So that's the thing that we must do to provide the API for our customers. So FileMaker Data API, basically I pass it to Paul Chen. He can actually get into more details for the implementation part.
Hello. All right. Thanks, James. So we'll quickly go start with the FileMaker Data API. What REST? REST is, everyone's talking about REST. But really, it's the integration lingua franca of the internet. If some people are old enough, where there's buzzwords like SOAP, WSDLs, fun times. But really, it's the thing right now. It's been in the market long enough that everyone and their mother has a REST API. So it's the starting point for when you can do integrations. Actually, it's interesting talking to people at the conference. There are actually quite a few who don't know much about REST and JSON. So I'll give, in one slide, what REST is. It's very simple. Your URL specifies a resource that you're going to work with. The examples here are either a collection, which is a set of objects, or a particular element. And when you make the HTTP call to that URL, you use 4 HTTP methods that are part of the standard that specify what you want to do. So if you do an HTTP get, that means you want to get the resource. Put means you're going to replace or edit. Post means you're going to insert a new one. And delete means delete that resource. And that, in a nutshell, is what REST means. Or I should say, that's kind of the prescription for REST. And of course, everyone, when you talk about REST, you also talk about JSON. I don't think it's necessarily specified that JSON is the payload, but pretty much everyone nowadays uses JSON as the payload. So JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. Also, in the abstract, it's very simple. There are objects. There are curly brackets. And inside objects are name-value pairs, property names and property values. So you see the var foo. That's how you write it in JavaScript. Below are 2 examples of how you access property values inside JavaScript. So you can use what's called dot notation, foo.property name, or you can use array syntax. So foo, property name in quotes. That's very important, like if you have spaces. You can't use dot notation. And the other thing in JSON are arrays, square brackets. It's just an ordered list of items. And that, in a nutshell, that's JSON. I've heard people say, what's JSON? I need to learn JSON. But in the abstract, that's actually what JSON is. All right, and this is a screenshot of the json.org. So those maybe who are visually more oriented can get a feel for what an object is and an array. And the values when we're talking about, they're string, number, object, array, the true, false booleans, and null. So it gets interesting because the value can be an object and an array. So pretty quickly, if you get a payload of JSON, it could get hairy. But in the end, it's you just follow these rules and you can get what you need. All right, since we call this under the hood, here is our FileMaker Data API architecture. For those who are familiar with how the architecture of XML and WebDirect are, it's somewhat analogous. At a front end, we have Node.js, which actually handles your REST requests. And that communicates with FMWIPD, which is our backend. And that's built on top of Draco, the scripting engine. And that communicates with the DBS. And so that's kind of the round trip of when you make a REST call, that's actually what's going on behind the scenes. All right, some information about the FileMaker Data API in 16. We do track usage per API call. And for 16, it's a trial, so you have unlimited calls. I know a lot of people are curious about licensing model, but that's above my pay grade. So don't bug me about that. And these API calls are separate from WebDirect Go concurrent connections, just in case you were wondering. All right, our current feature set for 16, we have create, read, and find of records, update, and delete. And you can download container field data. Those familiar with the XML, PHP APIs, it's the same. We give you a streaming URL, and then you can download it at your leisure, I suppose. And current feature development, we are looking to script execution and container upload. And out of the box, FileMaker 16, we have the Tableau connector for the desktop. And again, using the data API, again, the buzzword we're using is integration. But really, the data APIs allows you to pull the data out of FileMaker and allows you to put it, integrate with other systems. For instance, possibly Salesforce, Workato. You can do stuff with Facebook. We actually did a proof of concept against Salesforce. So, you can do it. Let's just put it that way. All right, and as developing the API, these are things I want to stress for developers. JSON will swallow duplicate properties. What I mean by that is, actually, sorry, my bottom bullet there, if you have in the curly brackets foo1 and foo2, that means you have two properties that are the same name. We can omit those. You can actually type text, but as soon as the JavaScript, something that parses JSON looks at those two, it will discard one of them and only give you one back. So what that means so when we give you like fields from the layout, don't avoid duplicate field names. I'm probably, a good idea in general, but I don't think, want to stress that you're going to lose data because you will only get one. Once you read it in, you only get one value. I believe, actually don't know for sure. Earlier on, we actually emitted both of those values, but it doesn't matter. As soon as you run some program that parses that JSON, it's gone, so that's very important. And kind of a follow-up to that, name your portals. I know we haven't enforced that in Pro recently, but the deal is that, so portals, we group them together. The fields from a portal, we group them together, and we use the portal name as kind of the unique identifier. But if we don't have a portal name, we'll use the table occurrence name. So if you have two portals pointing to the same, same related table, then you're going to, again, back to we'll name them the same, and you will, once you parse that in with your parser, you'll lose one set of data. I can't guarantee which one. So again, that's the duplicate property name issue. So name your portals. All right, and now a demo. So obviously when we provide, fixed problems, we actually need to know kind of the solution space or what you're trying to do to provide fix your problem. So for my demo, my kids are competitive swimmers. So one of the things I'm doing a lot of times is like, what's their time? We're at a meet, like, is it that? And I'm on my phone going between a PDF, which is the standard times for me as I swimming. I'm looking at their entry times. I'm looking at the scoreboard, and it's just this whole mess. So I figure it's 2017. I should be able to, automate something like that. So I gave it a go. So here we go, crash course on having a competitive swimmer. So you should get a background. So USA Swimming handles swimming for all of, swimming. And what's interesting as a kind of parent is that they actually have these what are called motivational time standards. They publish it every 4 years. So basically, quadruple A means you're really fast. I saw the PDF where they actually figured out how they compute it. But basically, so quadruple A is, I think, 5% slower than the top 16 time over the last 4 years. So basically that means, within 5% of that. So that means you're really, really fast. And of course, they come all the way down. More important if you're actually competitive swimming, you usually deal with a local swim committee. So those are they break up the country into local swim committees, and basically your swim club actually belongs to that local swim committee. So everything is done through the local swim committee. And for instance, for the Bay Area, we belong to the Pacific Swimming LSC, and that's coastal Northern California and Lake Tahoe and Reno. What's interesting about Pacific Swimming, they have these qualification times for meets. So most meets, they're just, they'll take you, you can go, you can swim, but there are these qualification meets, and so you need to meet the qualification times. And so the LSC, so Pacific Swimming, sets those times for the different zone championships, Junior Olympics, and Far Westerns. Actually, Junior Olympics is throughout the whole LSC, and Far Westerns actually is a 3-state meet, so it's really, really kind of a big deal. All right, and so what are you doing when you want to figure out how, times? What's important is pool size. So there are 2 in the US. There's short course yards and long course meters, which is the Olympic size swimming pool. Our seasons are split up fall to like about April or so. We're all swimming short course yards, 25 yards, and then we move to what's called long course season, which is the rest of the season until the end of July, and we get a break in August. Yay. And so the split up into called age groups, and the times for, there's 8 and under. That's usually set by the LSC, because when you get to, and we'll see it later, in terms of USA Swimming, they only care about 8 and under. So the LSCs actually do 8 and under just because it's tough to ask an 8-year-old to hit the times of a 10-year-old. It seems pretty unfair. So they add an 8 and under group. But the main ones are 10 and under, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 and over. And what's kind of stressful, I don't know if it's really stressful, I never asked, but as you obviously go between the age groups, the times get faster and faster. So I think the parents are more concerned, like, we want you to get A time, you gotta, we're always harping on the kids to kind of swim faster, because the problem is once you move to the next age group, you might have had a AAA time, but that gets bumped down to like BB. Basically, it's like, grinding in a multiplayer online system. You just you get bumped down, and so you gotta, kind of go back, and you think you arrive somewhere, but then you're back down. Oh, not to the bottom, but depends on how fast you are. Anyway, so again, what me as a parent, I'm checking against their personal best time and also the motivation times. All right, so this is a little thing, so a little diagram, looking at the scoreboard, looking at their meet sheet, their entry times, and sometimes that's actually, the entry times, they're your fastest times when you enter, but if you have a lot of meets, like coming together like every 2 weeks, it's the time when you signed up. So if I signed up a month ago, my kids might have had 2 or 3 meets. So the time, they'll talk to their coach, oh yeah, I got a new fast time. I'm looking at them, no, you just beat that time 2 weeks ago, it's just not updated. So not only entry times, but also their fastest times. And there's a little snapshot of the PDF of the motivational times. So I'm just checking these things all the time. All right, and so let's look at my database. Alrighty, so here is my swimmers table. The fields on the layout are just name, USS Swimming ID, which I don't really use, but anyway, an ID, there's a gender, and just for kicks, I'll put the mod ID. There's a portal to the times table that just lists their times, and so here it is. This is the times table, so it's just swimmer ID, length of the swim, time, pool size, date, and the event stroke. And the time standards. So these are all the B, all for the different, and I just put 10 and under just because my kids are 10 and under. But that is essentially this PDF, which contains all these times, put into the database. Alrighty, so let's go back to so that's what our database looks like. All right, so now to the FileMaker Data API. The first thing you do is you log in. This opens the solution. You pass in the credentials. The Data API hands you back a data token. And so this data token is essentially, you can think of it as your session. You pass it back to us so that you don't have to re-enter your credentials. And also, just lets us know that, what's your session. So it's very important. Hopefully in the examples we'll see it. All right, so one of my favorite tools, TCP dump. If you've ever done web stuff after a while, it's kind of invaluable. But here is an example of a login. You see at the top, HTTP is a very simple protocol. It's just kind of some text headers and, of course, the body. But if you look at the top, we do a post to the swim database. Our payload, if you see, but anyway, username, password, the layout you want. And then if you see at the very bottom, that's the token. It's a little long. And we also let you know what layout you come on, just in case you have a open window script or something like that, and error code and result. So pretty straightforward, and then you will use that token in subsequent calls to the API. Example right here. So this is a HTTP GET, and we're getting the list of swimmers. So that was the, hold on, let's go back. That is this table. So there are two swimmers. And so you see that at the top, there's a, well, modulo the funny characters, but there's the get to swim/swimmers. Below, you can see the fm-data-token, so that's passing back the data token back into the API so that we know who you are. And then at the bottom, there's a whole mess of JSON. And that's actually those two records that we saw, plus also the portal data. Hopefully, I believe, okay, so on this next slide, I put it into BB-edit and had it pretty, formatted. So as you can see, when we're talking about JSON, so we have a data property, and that itself is with the square brackets an array. And in that array is the two records for the swimmers. So the first one, the field data, which is the field on the layout. So you see the gender, name, ID, mod ID, and USS ID. And also, we return you a mod ID for the record. And then we have portal data. And so that's all the portal, so that's essentially the swim times. And so that's the swimmers' times that were recorded, that are put in the database. So if we, hold on, let me do this. So just to show that I'm not, so it's this, when we're looking at this record, this portal here, and all those records are coming over. All right, so I did the demo in Node.js, and let's go to it. All right, so here it is. It's implemented in Pug, which I guess was renamed from Jade, but that's a templating engine. So what happens is in Node, apps, the main entry point, we map some stuff and it calls sub modules. But let's go see the solution itself. All right, so you can see that this is a reflection of the swimmers table. I just did the swim times just to debug, make sure everything's working hunky-dory. But in theory, I should just have the name of the swimmers. And so, this is the big deal. All right, so this is what I wanted, kind of. So these are the fastest swim times that they have. And this is all the different time standards from B, BB, A to AAA. My kids aren't that fast. There's no point in doing quadruple A. But this is a radar map. So at the external edge, unfortunately, I couldn't figure out how to draw the actual outer thing. But this gives me at a glance how close they are to meeting that time standard. So you can see this is swimmer 2, so that's my son. He almost has all the B times. I think he's missing probably these guys right here. He's pretty close with BBs, and he has some ways to go with A's, and double A's and triple A's. But so this is something you can't do in FileMaker, these kind of fancy charts, and JavaScript this is built on top of the D3 library, charting library, and someone built a radar chart library on top of that. And so let's go look at how I do this. All right, so quickly, so the swimmer list, you can see this is for using the HTTPS library in Node, but you send a request or a GET, and you give it all these options. In the options, you specify kind of what you're doing. So for login, we're going to localhost port 443 HTTPS. We give it the path, we give it the method, and we give it the headers. And then also for login, we store the parameters in a separate structure. So basically, we say HTTPS, we request to the login options. Hopefully, that's with those things in them. For my demo, I use so when you get a data message from the request, we put it into, we store it in this response variable. And when it's ended, we'll parse the response, put it in the payload. So that is the list of swimmers. So that's back here. So that's for, oh, sorry, that's the login. All right, and so once we've logged in, we make sure that the error code is 0. We get the token, again, important, and then we'll go and we'll actually get the list of swimmers. And so that's a get. And again, we do the same thing. On data, we'll queue up the response. And when that's done, then to be nice, we'll log out. And once that's done, you'll see here, this is where the swimmer response, so that's the list from the swimmer's layout. And we'll store that in the swimmer's variable. And what happens is when we render, so for Node, this is swimmers, so this is this page right here. So when we ask to actually, someone requests that page, we render, which it means go to the pug file, which is named swimmer. So swimmers.pug, and we'll inject actually the swimmer's property, which is the swimmer's JSON data that we got from looking up the swimmer's layout. So quickly, all right, so pretty simple, but as you can see, I apologize for the concise pug syntax, but you can see that what happens is we loop over all the swimmers in that swimmer array. We print out a link to the radar map sheet for that particular swimmer with their name. And then for each time in the portal, we actually spit out time, dates, event strokes. So if you look back here, so here we have, and look at the bottom, that's radar/2. So that's the link that was in right here. And the contents of that hyperlink are the swimmer's name, and then we actually just emit all the swim times that are in that portal for the swim times. And so that's the swimmer's page. Now the fancy one, which is the login page. Again, just to be nice, we kind of log in and log out in one swoop. You could be smart about it. You could probably log in once or whatever, or do something along those lines. But I chose not to. So this route is along the radar. So when we go to here we go to radar/2. If you look here, so this is radar. It was mapped to. If you look here at the top, we mapped it to /radar. So when a /radar URL comes in, we will process it here. And we're looking for a swimmer ID. So we build up the parameters for the query. So we actually take the swimmer ID that's passed in, we set that as a swimmer ID, and then some other parameters. So we are querying for swimmer ID and also pool size LCM, so 50 long course meter pools, which at the moment is the only thing in the database. So, and then we ask for sort. That's actually not, I originally did that. It's not so important because you'll see later on. I have two utility methods. So create time standards data. It's assuming that we have these times from the times database, and we're just going to find the fastest times just in case. And also converts the time into milliseconds, so we can do mathematical operations, easy, straightforward mathematical operations. And the swimmer time data, it takes those time standards and puts them into a, sorts the data by, it's a two-dimensional array, but sorts it by event type, so it's like 50 free, and then by the time standards, B, BB, A, et cetera, et cetera. So again, it's easy, quick access for us when we want to do the computation. All right, so again, we do a login request. Now, this time around, after we get the token, we're actually going to do, first we grab the time standards, all the time standards. An interesting wrinkle here, I specify a range of 200. By default, we limit the range just if you don't specify to 100, just to make, prevent the load on the server. But you can specify, whatever range you want. And so that's the request. It's a get. So we get the time standards, and now we're going to get the swimmer time. So this is a little different this time around. Find as a post method, and the data is actually from way up here. I believe, let me see if I have a, okay. So this is a capture again. There's captured of TCP dump. So this is the post, swim times. This is our query. So what we're doing is we're looking for swimmer ID is 2, pool size is 1 course meters, and we're sorting on event length, and we're sorting by descending order. And here is the result, all in one line you can't see. But so that's what comes from here, from the swimmer times request, and that's stored into swimmer response. So once we're done, so we have the standard times, and we have the particular swimmer times. So we call create swimmer time data, so that's going to give you a list of the fastest times that they have. And then I create standard time, so that's in the double array, and we'll see that on the pug side, a little clearer. And then we call render, so we'll render, again, to radar.pug, and we pass in times in standard format. Oh, I forgot to mention, because I had this last night. Out time, so if I want pretty print, I store the same array, but I have just the data as it came, which is just in hours, minutes, in fractional seconds. So we can print that as opposed to 30,948, which doesn't really tell you how fast things are. So we pass those 3 arrays into the front end, and that is here. A lot of stuff. This is all the charting stuff, setup, style sheet links, the source for the radar chart D3, and the radar chart built on top of that, just some CSS styles. So here, this is actually what prints out those times. It's in pug. So we look in the times in standard format array. We take the value and key from each one, and we just print them out. So here we go. The event and the time values. All right, and so there's a function that calculate distance to standard. So if you've given a swimmer's time, and given a standard time, that's to figure out for the chart, like how close they are to the time. So it just does a subtraction and does a percentage calculation. And so here's the meat of kind of what the graph does. So for all the, and I apologize for quick and dirty here, but basically we check for the swimmer times, and if it has own property, what that means is that checks to see if the object has that value property set inside the object, as opposed to inheriting it from a superclass, inherited class. So I just make sure that someone actually set that value inside that object. We calculate the distance to standard for that, and if there wasn't a property, we just set the value to 0. So basically, in theory, that should be how close are they to that time standard. And actually, if you see here, so this is where I built up that array, so I can easily say, I want the BB times for a particular event. And so we just kind of copy and paste for B, A, and AAA times. And this is all set up for the radar chart. Here's the meat. We actually set the data for the charts and have it render. And then actually here I just added the little tags over the radar charts for the A, BB, AA, and AAA. They're just sitting over there. And in a nutshell, that is pretty much it. An interesting thing I found out last night is actually, I guess, because it's interesting to kind of compare. So this is my daughter, and this is my son. But what's interesting as we move back and forth is you can see, I believe my daughter is a little bit quicker in the freeze here, the 50 free, 100 free. And my son is a little bit faster percentage-wise to the 200 IM and the 100 fly. And they're both roughly equivalent in the back. Actually, back is one of their better strokes. But it's interesting to see how the shape of the radar, of the radar chart kind of is for their given times. All righty. So that is an example of using the FileMaker Data API. All righty. So we now open up to questions. I believe we've got some microphones, so if you want to ask any questions, go, raise your hand, and we'll have get you a microphone.
Thank you. Very excited in the direction you're going in with the modern standards compliant way of exchanging data. I'm curious about the choice to use HTTP put for sparse updates. And I wonder if you could explain if there's some thinking behind that. And if not, is there a chance you might go to patch as the more standards compliant way of doing sparse updates?
No, it was just the way that we, at the time, decided to do it. Again, it's evolving. It's not like it's set in stone. So we're always open to, considering new ways, or augmenting. Most likely, probably an augment. We'll probably augment. We don't want to, since we already released in 16, it's tough to kind of just break somebody right off the bat if people are using stuff. So we'll take it into consideration. But I think we just went out of the gate, and that's just kind of the, that's where we started out. So probably not the answer you wanted, but that's, that's where we're at.
All right, I'm translating this from our PHP team, who's got a question now that they've been monkeying around with this. The current XML deal gives you some metadata about the fields that you're requesting, yes. Okay? It gives you, the field name, she's already there, but also the field type. Is this something that, I'm not even sure if I'm framing this question right, but that's what they're asked. Is that something that is coming or you can get, or is that's not even a question to ask?
That is on the roadmap. Metadata,
okay.
We have to consider, a good general purpose solution for metadata, and that is, we are working on it.
Along with like found count, I know there's workarounds by creating a field and then querying that, but is that something that's also possibly on the way as well?
We'll consider it.
Okay, because it
but
helps.
Definitely metadata. So things like valueless, script names, database names, like those simple things that you really need to kind of utilize your solution. Yes, those are definitely things we are thinking about.
All right, thanks a lot, mate.
Thank you.
Just following on from that one, value lists would be really useful to get access to. When you're building a web application, you want to make sure you're using the same value lists. And if the key value pairs could be the other way around to the PHP API, so they kind of made sense, that would be handy. But that's a kind of a question. The other thing that is kind of challenging with the way FileMaker works with the record IDs, is there any thought to move to a true UUID for records that can be used both for get and update?
We have thought about that. And until we come up with a good solution for that, and that I think would need, and that's a deep question, the answer to that is kind of has to be throughout the whole system, right? And so that's, we look to put that into Draco and utilize that in that instance. So that's asking a lot. It's not something that I can turn around for you tomorrow. So we are aware of it, and even for things, and people bring up all the time, import, export, you run into that issue. So it's on our minds. I don't have an answer for you, but yeah, we know about it.
How long does the session tokens last?
15 minutes.
Thank you.
Idle. So if you're continually banging on it, we reset the count. And sorry, I forget who.
You said 50 minutes idle?
Yes. And that's actually a known issue with certain things, especially integrations. We're playing around with Workato, and they kind of assume you've just have a connection forever. So what we try to impress the people we're working with, if we can partner with them, is that can you have a notion of re-authenticate? But yes, we know that there are some places where they just they assume you get a token, and we can bang on you forever and ever until the heat death of the universe. But no, 15 minutes, yeah. Next question.
Please write this one down. RFC 5789 clearly specifies put as a replace the entire record, patch, amend pieces of a record.
Okay.
You shouldn't be afraid of anyone breaking anything.
Got it.
You're still in beta, aren't you?
Hmm?
You're still in pre-beta on this, aren't
I
you?
guess the technical term is trial, so yes.
Yes. And I'm also asking for a Linux version of the server on premises.
That is a product marketing decision, so engineering can't answer that question here.
In your demo, you were logging in and logging out with
Yes.
each query. Can you explain the rationale? I'm down here,
Oh, sorry. Okay.
kind of in the middle, over here.
All right. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Can you explain the rationale for doing that, rather than for logging in once and storing the token and then using the same token over multiple requests in your application?
Yeah, you can do that. I just, like I kind of mentioned, I was being lazy. It's just one go, just make sure I'm in and out. Yeah, I think in a well-formed, well-built application, you will just do a login once and then, have that token around and use it. And given that we talked about the 15-minute time limit, have a affordance for if you're timed out, of course. That's always the tricky thing, because do you really want to hold someone's authentication, lying around just to do that? And again, that comes back to there are certain APIs that kind of assume they've got you, they're connected to you forever. And so, like I said, we've really tried to impress upon people, Workato, that we'd really like some way to say, re-authenticate, So anyway, there's no just me quickly, making up a demo.
Thank you.
I know REST-FM that has an API access to FileMaker as a plugin, and with some of the stuff in Ty Geis thing on Monday, you have to have a layout that you're accessing with the API, and your fields have to be on that layout to return the values. Is that also the case with this API?
Yes, we will use the layout specifies what fields we will retrieve. Next, yes.
Yes. Where are you running the Swimmers app from?
My local machine. It's on. Everything's local. So my FileMaker server instance is local. My Node app is also local to this machine.
Is it running within the FileMaker server or outside of it?
It is a Node.js app that's run. I run from the command line.
Okay. And so we've explored, for better words, hacking the API, modifying, creating custom routes. Do you have any guidance or thoughts on that?
Don't, but I can't stop you. If you're not going to directly use what we provide with the API, it's at your own risk, I guess is what I'll say. I mean, are you actually creating your own Node app and using? I guess I should ask specifically, what do you mean by hacking the API?
Creating custom API endpoints to process data coming from another API in order to convert it to something that the FileMaker REST API can ingest.
Okay, as long as you use kind of what we publish as the API, the call itself, a REST call, utilize a REST call, that should be, as long as you use kind of our public APIs that we publish for the REST API, then I don't have a problem. I should say I don't have a problem with it, but.
That's the answer I expected.
Okay. I mean, so there is this notion we may have private APIs that aren't available, they won't publish and available to you. Those are definitely used at your own risk if you find them.
So if I understand correctly, I think there's nothing in your demo that's specific that required the data API. You could have done this in FileMaker 15 using the PHP and XML in a Node.js application to render a web page the exact same way, right?
Correct.
So are there clear advantages right now to using the data API in third-party, in applications like this?
Let me answer that question. So basically, data API is two-way. So if you're talking about only getting data from FileMaker, I mean, you can do either way. But if you wanted to talk to third party, they publish RESTful API, then you have to go with their API. And what we do is we provide the data API so you can match that kind of specification to the third party, so make things much easier for you to handle.
But in a specific application like this, is there, for example, speed advantages to the data API?
The data API is the way to go. I mean, the RESTful API is the trend. So if you wanted to catch up with that train, definitely we suggest you move on to use the REST API.
What I'd say is if you're going to do a one-off, you use whatever works. But if it's something you're going to maintain for a while, 2, 5 years, we are continually improving the API. So as we mentioned, one of the big things coming down the pike is container upload, which is not provided by PHP or XML. So that's just your decision to make. If the customer needs something in 6 months, and that's all you're going to do for them, use whatever you need to get the job done.
I had a question about your tip about, over here, about duplicate field names.
Yes.
So FileMaker doesn't allow you to make 2 fields with the same name in the same table. So are you talking about putting fields with the same name from different tables on the layout?
Yes, just the name of the field on the layout.
Okay, so do you not prefix?
Well, actually, sorry. If you do, this is the outcome of a bug. I forgot how QA set up.
Okay, so let me answer that question. For data API to work, we talk about multiple levels. So for example, in the third party, so what people do is they hide the details in the table level. So they don't want you to access the table level. What they wanted to access is the application or business logic layer. So equivalently, that from FileMaker, the business logic is handled by the layout. So in layout, you really hide the secrets from your table. You can have the same column being, represented in 3 fields. You can manipulate it that way. So from that point of view, the REST API is anchored on top of your business logic. So if you have 3 fields from the same column in the same table, you can do that. It's up to you to present that way. And we are going to wrap on top of this business logic and present it to a third party. So this is kind of a design decision whether you want to do it. But our suggestion is if you do that, then you need to distinguish between one field from the other and name it differently.
Okay, so I was assuming that if you had, let's say you had ID in the table, that the layout is the context for that layout. And then you have a related table that also has a field called ID that you would do. FileMaker typically would prefix the related one with the name of the...
Related fields are fully qualified. In other words, fields that aren't in the base table of the layout, they are fully qualified.
So you put the relationship
So
name.
you can't, that wouldn't be a way you do it. But trust me,
Okay, I was just,
I have a bug. I fixed a bug on this.
Okay,
So.
I was just trying to imagine how you could have, I guess you could put the same field on the layout from the same table twice, and then it would only, but you can't change the name of that, so.
Right, but again, and how useful is that? But it's
Right.
just something to keep in mind,
Okay.
because,
And certainly relevant, obviously, for portals, so.
yeah, it's very important for portals.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Whenever you use the API, you get the warning that's an experimental state. Now we had the discussion on what to use now, where to start development. Can you elaborate a little bit about what is experimental about the state? Does that mean parts will be gone? Does it only mean that a kind of session model for cost might come up? Is there a technical thing that is experimental? So how do we have to rate that and keep that in mind? Because if you go to a customer now and say, we have something experimental here, it might be gone next year, would you want us to invest in that? They usually say, no, take something which is stable and available.
So basically, as we mentioned, this is the future direction we move on. So you can interpret that way that we are going towards there. We're not going to come back. And the state of the current implementation is stable. But the features may be not rich enough for everybody to consume. So that's why we call it a trial at the moment. And that's why we have this session and welcome your feedback. And then we can go back and say, well, we probably need to do a few more things for the general public to accept it.
Right, it's not going to change too much, and I'm very cognizant of trying not to break things, even if we add features going forward. So my hope is, unless it's something very egregious, that what solutions you make now using the data API will work going forward.
May I add one part to the question?
Sure.
There are other parts in FileMaker that we know will elaborate, will evolve. Look at the layout inspector. There might be coming things too, and might be going things, and it will change. We all know that. But there's this specific warning this time. This is what I'm asking for. Why is there a specific warning this time?
I'm not sure what the, I mean, we label it as a trial, so I'm not sure what the warning comes from, other than, it's not, we don't claim it to be a full product. I think in the end, I mean, what we're trying to get the message is that we don't have, the licensing model is not there, so we can't call it a fully 1.0 product. That's really kind of the big holdup. But it's not like it's going away. Then I'm out of it. Then I'm out of work.
Up to tested on up to 5 workers, and you've now sort of sequestered PHP to being a proxy as well as the API, right? Proxy to the server machine. Right. Are you guys at some point thinking about the ability to, since you're going to monetize this product based on connections, are you going to be putting it on the workers? I mean, are we going to be able to kind of scale this through worker machines like you are starting to do with WebDirect, or not? Or don't know?
Right now, the worker machine scaling out is only for WebDirect.
Yes.
And WebDirect basically is our focus at the moment.
Okay, but
in the future, it's possible for us to scale out APIs on the worker machine, but right now it's not our primary focus.
All right, thanks.
I have a comment to the guy that asked about he wanted UUIDs instead of the record ID. And if he really wants to know why, maybe he should read Omni Orb source code and rephrase the question.
Any more questions?
Sorry to hog 2 questions here.
No worries.
Any possibility that you'll be returning repeating fields as arrays instead of as separate properties?
I will say that we did go there originally, but there was a reason that escapes me at the moment why they are separate. So we did go there, but I think for simplicity or there was a particular reason why it's done the way it is, but we can always go reinvestigate doing it that way. Yeah. Is that it?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.